Good morning, everyone. I'm a fourth year PhD student at University of Rochester in school of nursing, and also a trainee for the ARVR PhD training program. It's my honor today to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Erin Baylor, a well-known established healthcare professional at school of nursing. Dr. Baylor began her nursing education career in 2004 and held many teaching and leadership positions at University School of Nursing. As a specialty director at Pediatric Nurse Practitioner Program and the director of the Simulation Lab, as well as associate professor at School of Nursing. Dr. Baylor can bring us a wealth of knowledge and expertise to the table. Dr. Baylor's goal is to prepare tomorrow's nurse practitioner, nurse educator, and the clinical leader, and prepare a well expertise and knowledge to this group. Now let's welcome Dr. Baylor to this position.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having me here today. As Sandy so delightfully introduced, I am here from the School of Nursing and am really excited to share with you all what our experience has been using virtual reality with our undergraduate and graduate students. All right, so I guess to start out, I'd like to sort of summarize what kind of drove us to begin using AR in VR. And, you know, our philosophy is that the curriculum should always drive the technology, right? So we kind of started out with a needs assessment. What do our students need that we are having some gaps in their education to be able to provide, right? And so we realize that there are situations for our students where the clinical placements that they get don't always expose them to everything that we know is really important for them to learn to become a nurse or a nurse practitioner, a nurse educator, nurse leader. So we wanted to give our students opportunities to do more clinical decision-making and critical thinking at the bedside of the patient. What VR offers is an opportunity to do that without actually potentially harming a patient, right? So they can go through these cases, and if they make the wrong decision and there's a poor patient outcome, they haven't actually harmed anybody. So our goal is to be able to create psychologically safe environments for them to practice the skills that they're learning without the repercussions of a poor patient outcome. You know, we look at our curriculum and we think about what are the key concepts, you know, that our students need to be able to really have expertise in. So when we think about, I'll give a couple examples, but when we think about taking care of patients with cardiac problems, for example, not every student is going to be exposed to patients with every different type of cardiac disease that could happen, right? So in VR, we can expose them to multiple patients experiencing different types of acute and chronic cardiac diseases, where they can learn, almost developing a muscle memory, if you will, on what are the essential components of providing safe patient care. So I have a couple just screenshots of the VR technology that we use here, which I think for students feels very immersive, right? So one of the examples is labor and delivery. You know, students are excited when they are doing their women's health rotation, if they get to experience and be at the bedside when babies are being born. That doesn't always happen, right? And sometimes complications arise. And when a complication arises, the first thing that happens to a nursing student is move out of the way. Right? This is a critical situation. So it's not always our student that's right there making the decisions at the bedside. It's the more experienced practitioners. So we can expose them to situations that we consider to be high risk and low frequency so that they can gain expertise. If and when they're in that clinical situation in the future, they can at least say, okay, I I know what to do here. I've been here before, even if it was virtually, right? And most importantly, we want students to become self-directed learners, where they can do some self-assessment and reflection on what their own strengths are and what areas that they need to work on. So by doing cases over and over again, they can gain more confidence as well as competence in the skills that are being asked of them. So to give you a little timeline, this would have looked a little different if it weren't for COVID. We were really gearing up to start our VR program, and then COVID kind of set us back a little bit of time. Our goal was to make sure that we had the very best technology, both hardware and software, that was available on the market when we were ready to implement VR into our curriculum. So we have a very fortunate at the School of Nursing. We just built a 26,000 square foot, very innovative experiential learning and simulation center, where we have tried really hard to authentically replicate the kinds of clinical environments that our students are going to be expected to practice in. And one of the areas that we kind of designed, if you will, with architects was ARVR suites. And those rooms were about, as I was giving tours, the least impressive rooms in our facility, because I said, I just want empty rooms with no natural light, because the technology coming out was like, we didn't know if we were going to be using the cave technology, wearable technology. So they are literally these empty rooms with no windows or anything. However, when students get into that room and they put on their headsets, it transforms them into an emergency room during a mass casualty trauma, or they walk in and the child is going into anaphylactic shock. And so it feels very immersive to them, even though the room itself might look a little plain. So I kind of began this journey back in 2018 when I was exploring who's doing VR in nursing education and what are they doing and how is it working, right? So we did some benchmarking, did a needs assessment for our own learners, and then we started surveying all of the technology that was available. And obviously we were looking specifically for clinical application, right? So we wanted very authentic patient encounters in VR. So then I developed a proposal, and this had everything to do with space and, of course, money, and how is it going to fit, and making sure that I could get the highest level of our administration kind of on board with embracing this into our school and our curriculum. And then we started aligning it into our curriculum. So every undergraduate student in the School of Nursing at the U of R undergoes about 17 virtual reality cases over the course of a year that are all very thoughtfully aligned and scaffolded in their curriculum. And our graduate students undergo approximately 8 to 10 VR cases that are aligned also into their advanced practice curriculum. So we started working with our content experts in our School of Nursing. This is where we started to have, I'll be very transparent, some buy-in. Well, I don't know if I really want to replace a lecture with them going down and playing with these headsets on, right? So faculty at first were they weren't sure this was going to be a valuable enough learning experience to necessarily replace like a traditional PowerPoint presentation in their class. So we had faculty try it, and I'm thrilled to have here today a couple of the people from our school that were really hugely invested in getting the buy-in. So Dr. TJ Nervina is one of our faculty who has really taken the lead on VR in our undergraduate and graduate programs. And then Alicia Rios is our simulation solutions engineer. She's our IT, who literally works one-on-one with students while they are in VR to make sure that the technology is never a barrier, that they can focus on the learning and not get caught up with the technology for it. So none of this would have been possible when we started implementing this if I didn't have some like early adopters and enthusiasts that were really on board to make it a success for our students. And then this past fall, we initiated our pilot. So we started a pilot with 80 students. That was 30 undergraduate and 50 graduate NP students going through VR cases. That pilot has now expanded to 186 students in the spring semester, which we're wrapping up in just a couple of weeks. So I'll share some very preliminary data that we have. Obviously, we're not even done with our data collection, so it's pretty preliminary. And now we're looking to basically expand. And with anything that's new and innovative, you have to constantly be thinking, how could we be doing this better? Technology only advances. It doesn't go backwards, right? So what was cutting edge a year and a half ago when we made the choice of the technology that we were going to be using, we recognize that that is probably getting outdated every day, right? So I never tell my patients as a clinician, I am going to provide the most evidence-based care that was the best thing 5 years ago, right? I want to assure my patients that whatever the most current evidence is on how I can best treat this, we're always staying current. And with technology, we have to stay current as well. So some kind of preliminary results. And again, this is, I tried to put this in two buckets, which is what were some of the strengths of students learning in the VR environment? And then what were some of the weaknesses of the VR environment? And so this is how we will further identify where does it fit in the curriculum? Which learners are going to get the most out of this, right? So we know that VR did a great job of helping to prepare our students to respond to changes in their patient's condition. So that's great, right? That was huge. That was really what we set out to do, that critical thinking and decision-making at the bedside. Students recognized that this helped them to be able to prioritize the needs of their patient, which is also very important. Confidence, right? They feel more confident in making clinical decisions, which is important for our students, especially as they approach graduation. And the first cohort of students that we have been piloted on, they're all going to be walking the stage in just a few weeks and graduating. So they hopefully will be taking this right into the clinical setting. They were much more aware of patient safety. So that's important, right? So they developed an awareness about the importance of patient safety, because when they're in VR, they're getting this feedback at the end of their case that's letting them know, hey, you forgot to ask the patient what their allergies were before you gave that medication, or you didn't put the side rail up before you walked away from that bedside. So they're kind of learning about the safety, again, in an environment where there was no safety risk to patients. And the debriefing. So debriefing the students afterwards and making those clinical connections proved to be really valuable in improving their clinical judgment. So that's where our data is leaning in towards of the strengths of using VR. The weaknesses, VR is not the best technology to use if your goal is to help them have great communication with their patients, because that didn't feel as authentic to them. And that's no surprise, right? They needed a lot of IT support. So, Alicia here, I think she had 800 and some individual appointments, one-on-one, just in our fall semester pilot to work with students. So it's resource heavy that they need that support from IT. VR was not a great way for students to reinforce learning about pathophysiology and pharmacology. I looked at that and they said, no, that really wasn't what it helped me to do. And navigating the electronic health record, or the EHR, did not feel authentic to them also in VR. It was a lot of pointing and clicking. And the psychomotor skills. So of course in VR, when you're, putting in an IV or catheterizing a person, the psychomotor skills are not exactly the same as doing it on a real person. So this kind of validated in a way that our goal was to have them learn how to be better thinkers at the bedside, not necessarily just better doers, right? So, but it's important to acknowledge what it does well and what it doesn't do well. So student feedback. So I kind of lumped student feedback into 3 columns, which was we love it, not so sure about it, and we did not like this. So the data that we collected from students, we used the SUS, the System Usability Scale, and the SET-M, which is the simulation effectiveness tool that's been modified. And so breaking down sort of what student perceptions and also some of the faculty that were using this with their students. Of course, we had a bunch of students who were like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, right? So the people who are excited about this kind of technology, or maybe they were gamers or they are gamers, and they just thought this was really cool that they could, instead of class, go put on a VR headset and, and go through these patient cases. Some students really appealed to that, while others did not. I'll be very transparent. It is fully immersive. So the software, so the hardware that we use, I should have said this, is the Oculus Quest 2 headset. The software that we use is produced by a company out of the UK called Oxford Medical Simulation. So OMS has about 120 different cases that we could choose from, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. And it is very immersive. So when the student is in headset, they are hearing all of the sounds that you would hear if you were in the middle of an emergency room taking care of a patient. So there's alarms going off, there's other people talking. So they definitely feel like they are very immersed. They have no idea what else is going on around them outside of the headset. Running simulations in VR is really sustainable, right? Because when I use one of our high fidelity human patient simulators, right, these $100,000 mannequins that replicate all human physiology, it's a lot of setup. It takes 2 people to run it. If it's a postpartum hemorrhage, we're making liters of fake blood that are going to rush out of the patient during the delivery, right? In VR, this happens, and it's not a big setup. It's not a big cleanup, right? It doesn't have a lot of expendable costs like, materials. So you could run a scenario over and over again without it costing a significant amount of time and money every time. So very feasible to keep going. Wide range of cases, right? Everything from newborns to children to grumpy teenagers to adults to older adults, and it feels very realistic. And then students really appreciated that real-time decision-making. They were making decisions. It wasn't like they were making them with a helicopter instructor watching over their shoulder while they're at the bedside of real patients, right? They had the opportunity to make the decisions. Our students that were a little skeptical, I would say that they found it difficult to acclimate to the sort of virtual headset environment. And it was more getting used to the kind of visual accommodation and some of those kinds of things that are unique in headset. Students had a lot of fear that they were going to get sick. They equated this to like a ride at Epcot, right? Oh, I can't do that. I don't ride roller coasters. And I'm like, this is not riding a roller coaster. You can be sitting the entire time. You're not moving around doing all kinds of stuff. But the students had this fear about that. And instead of like that typical love-hate relationship, this was like a hate-love relationship, right? They thought they were going to hate it. They were really apprehensive. And then they ended up really liking it at the end, which was great. The poor feedback that we got from students that didn't like it, they would describe that they couldn't tolerate it. It gave them a headache. It made them feel nauseous. Nobody actually got sick, but we made sure that every student had the ability to do the cases in a 2-dimensional way on a laptop. So it wasn't like they missed out on the opportunity. It just wasn't as fully immersive in the VR environment. These are not team-based. These are more individual-based. So we're big proponents of teaching our students to work in teams because that's what healthcare is. And this is more of it's you and the patient. So not a lot of interprofessional collaboration. Scheduling, right? So 186 students, each doing many cases over a semester. You can imagine we only own 10 headsets right now. This is our pilot. So that was enough of an investment that the university was going to make until we had some data to decide if we're going to continue this. So 186 students, they're each doing you know, somewhere in the realm of like close to 20 cases, and we only have 10 headsets. So scheduling was interesting. Let me say, we figured it out, but it was interesting. The management of the Meta accounts, and I don't know if everyone knows what I'm talking about here, but when you're using an Oculus Quest 2 headset, you have to go through this really fun process of creating a Meta account for every student, you know, and so that was that on behalf of our IT person who had to do all of that, that was definitely in the thumbs down category for sure. The cost, you know, when I pitched this to the university, cost was a big factor. You know, those headsets are what? Good $400 a piece. We have the room, we have the technology. The software is $250 per student per year to have unlimited use of the cases. So this is a big investment. So that's obviously something to consider. And then facilitator expertise. So I was really fortunate to have, you know, some faculty that were willing to say, yeah, let's just try this. Let's develop some expertise in this. There's not a lot of people doing it. Let's figure it out. But that can be a barrier for sure. So as we think about like next steps, right? I'm really excited to see what is going to be available in the AR realm as opposed to the strictly VR in which we're doing. You know, the idea of a patient or with a student working with a patient in simulation and being able to augment the reality by accessing different, whether it be like pathophysiology, like what's going on inside the patient's chest while they're having a heart attack, right? So merging those two, I think is a really exciting next step. And interprofessional education. So we're excited to try this with people from other disciplines and see how it works for our students to work collaboratively with each other at the bedside. So we've reached out to the School of Medicine, and they are excited to perhaps have they're just a little bit behind us in terms of integrating the curriculum and deciding on software packages and all of that. But I think that there is some excitement for us to be able to start collaborating together on that for team-based healthcare. So it's hard to imagine, like none of us believe that like our phones would be able to be a mini computer, right? I feel like right now in time, it's hard for me to imagine what the ARVR capabilities are going to be in even 5 years. This is going to be totally outdated by then, right? So, so we're excited to see sort of where the next steps are. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for Dr. Bailey's wonderful and interesting, insightful presentation. Other question you like to ask, or Dr. Bailey have other question for the audience? It's both fine to ask question now. Okay. Yeah.
What do you think the timeline is for the implementation of AR?
I think that's the next step. So I think it's a matter of getting the technology, right, that has the appropriate software to integrate, again, so the curriculum is what drives the technology for us, right, on the academia side. So I think as soon as there is technology that can support the learning goals, which is, you know, facilitating that clinical decision-making, critical thinking, prioritization of patient needs, then yeah.
So when I look at the negatives that you cited for VR, it seemed to me that quite a number of them could be overcome with AR. Do you have the same perception?
Yes, because it's the inability for students to calibrate, you know, some of the VR, like the visual accommodation, right, that occurs, because there's a lot going on. They're not just looking at one thing. There's an entire hospital room that are trauma rated. So there's things here in their eyes, and you have difficulty accommodating to that. So I think once the technology emerges, and I think AR is going to be a great window for that to happen. Yeah. I'm hoping to learn from any of you today. What is the next technology, right?
Just a quick follow-up, personal experience. So in terms of these weaknesses, some of those will be mitigated by better design. But do you think there's something fundamental there that never resolved? say at the for your application?
Well, I think that some of like there's always the perceptions, right? So some of what, our students are all adult learners. We, at the School of Nursing, we are either a second degree or graduate program. So, our students are sometimes a little bit hesitant to being able to try new things. They're hesitant to walk into a patient's room the first time, though. They get over it, right? They're hesitant to put that first idea in. They get over it, right? So I feel like the experiences that students did get over their apprehension and some of the concern that they have about can they tolerate it, some of that I think will improve once we're in more of an AR environment. But I think things like the communication skills, like really sitting down and having like the conversation with a patient, they never feel completely authentic in a virtual environment. But I'd love to be proved wrong. Yeah.
A quick question on the structure of the simulation. How rigorous is the decision-making ability? Like, can the student decide, I want to just leave the room right now? Can it how much autonomy do the students have to make any kind of decision versus just multiple choice? Which of these things should I do?
Yeah, and that is the beauty of it, is that they whatever decision they make, there is going to be a consequence to that decision, right? So whether it was the right decision or maybe not the right decision, they're going to get that as part of the automatic feedback that's provided to them in the program. So if they decide to leave the room, which they can do, or they take way too long focusing on something that really isn't the patient's priority, that patient's going to deteriorate, and they're going to have feedback at the end that, like, your patient had very low oxygen, and it took you 9 minutes to apply oxygen to the patient. What were you thinking? So the individualized debriefing really helps students get a very detailed score. So we don't think of it as a grade, but it does give them a score, and they can repeat cases as many times as they want to. This is all formative learning. They're not graded in their VR performance, but we certainly look at trends. You realize that some students are really struggling with these kinds of concepts, which might be figuring out what labs do I need to order, or how do I interpret the x-rays that were done. So they get better and better with repeated exposure. Yeah.
So I have a question about performance of the training. So how do you measure the performance of the trainees' performance? Especially because we have AR has been accepted for AR. So will the trainee be identically good as those without the AR or VR assistance? And more importantly, will there be some bias or some error perception induced due to the technology? And it could be fatal.
Right? I think that invites a question, because ideally, I'm an education researcher, right? I'm an academician and a practitioner, right? But ideally, we would have had a control group that didn't get the VR, and then we would have, our group that did get the VR. And but we kind of wrestled with that ethically, that we want to withhold this learning activity on top of our students, just so that we can. So we made a conscious decision not to do that. So the data that we're collecting is probably some bias, because we don't have the control group to figure out which ones produce the nurses that we want to be here, us, right? Which ones are better papers at the right time. But because we integrated this software into your curriculum, by the end of it, they were really able to get some good feedback on what knowledge, skills, and attitudes were improved or changed, right? And they identified themselves, even though they started out kind of skeptical and a little hesitant. They identified that this really created opportunities for them to learn to do better in person at that time. That they were able to kind of process, here the priority needs of my patient, here's the decision I'm going to make, and I'm going to reflect on whether that was the right decision or not. So I think we achieved what we were hoping. Yeah, that would have been much cleaner now. My PhD person.
Thank you for the question. Maybe last one question. Okay.
More comment. Having known people in nursing management for years and years and years, you're creating the next generation of nursing management by doing this. Because, for example, on weekend in a hospital, all the nursing director is not there in most cases. So you've got the head of cardiac covering a maternity emergency. And this gives them access, if they know how to use it, to help those nurses in those departments. I think it's phenomenal.
There's a whole opportunity that for nurses that are already in practice. I mean, look at COVID. We learned a lot from COVID in nursing. Anyways, and one of the things that we learned is we all need to be really flexible and adaptable. And I was used to taking care of children in a specific environment, and in COVID, it was like, all right, we need people in the ICU, right? I wouldn't have been a nurse who wanted to do all ICU, but this could have been an opportunity to train people that were kind of being stretched outside of,
It's immediate cross-training under emergency situations. If you have the relevant training, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you for the wonderful discussion. Yeah. Let's transfer to Qinqin to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, everyone. I will introduce. I'm Qinqin. I will introduce the Professor Susan Lakin. She is a professor in the College of Art and Design and a fellow in the School of Individualized Study at the Rochester Institute of Technology. She is the director of Frameless Labs, who serves to connect ideas, academic, and great outside community of extended reality through leaders. Building from the stress and the theory of creative and technology mind, joint focus on XR, Frameless Lab provide a dedicated center of excellence of forest ideally in emerging immersive experience at IIT. Professor Susan has a Bachelor of Fine Art in Photography from Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, and an MFA in the Studio Art from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Working across the disciplinary in the photography and academic practice, her artwork has received many awards and is part of the permanent collection at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, Oakland, Museum of California, Griffin Museum of Photography, and Photography Museum of Lishui, China. So Professor Susan teaches classes and explores the interaction of technology, music, art, and design, and the collaborative of community project in the nonprofit sector. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here today, to be part of this event. I actually come to Rochester from California. I have a commercial photography background, and so my faculty position is in the School of Photographic Arts and Sciences at RIT. I'm now working in virtual reality and augmented reality. So today, I am here to talk about how virtual reality and augmented reality could be leveraged for social impact. I'm going to use two projects that I'm producing as examples, and then at the end of the slides, I have some organizations and groups that are working in this realm too, as resources for you to take home with you to explore other experiences as well. I always like to review the terms just very quickly of augmented reality and virtual reality being augmented reality and mixed reality being the overlay of digital content onto the real world. On the left is a project that we did here at Memorial Art Gallery in 2012, where our students animated paintings from the permanent collection. Virtual reality is the immersion of in a completely immersive 360 environment. As you can see in the right, you're using the head-mounted display. This was a project out of Japan where we had the full haptic suit at an international conference on computer graphics. And then extended reality is an umbrella term we use for including virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. So the first project I wanted to share with you all today is a virtual reality project that I produced for the Society for the Protection and Care of Children here in Rochester. And SPCC is an amazing organization with deep roots in Rochester that was established back in 1875. A young girl in the tenements of New York City was being abused by her guardian. And a social worker recognized the circumstances, was able to take her into the court system under the protection of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in the first court case for the protection of children in the United States. She was then taken away from this horrendous environment and brought to Rochester to live out her life then with a family here in Rochester. And it's a story that very few people in the community know about the story of Mary Ellen and the fact that she was brought here to Rochester, and that SPCC is one of the oldest organizations in the country that serve children in our community. So just an amazing group of people, and they now offer a wide range of services in our community. One of the unique qualities of SPCC is that they're family-centered in their care. They really want to work with the family unit. So if they take a child out of an abusive home, they're also looking to see of ways to heal the entire family as a whole, which is a component that I think makes them really unique and very successful as well in the programs, as you see listed here, that they offer in our community. They also have, and it's due to these programs and to this approach that they're very successful in their track record for the services that they provide. The team themselves are small but mighty. Every time I work with them, I'm so impressed with what they're able to accomplish with so little in some respects. And they have no marketing team whatsoever. And I come from a commercial photography background, working in advertising and marketing. And the social workers are the ones that are running their social media streams. They're the ones that are running the fundraisers. So I've been working with them and really trying to figure out ways that we can help to really tell the story of SPCC. Not only the history and the deep roots that are here in Rochester, but to showcase the amazing work of the social workers and therapists that are out in the community every day. Also wanted to use, create something that could be used for fundraising as well. So some of the challenges with SPCC in terms of getting this information out into the community is that they're serving children. So we can't photograph or document children. And especially in the circumstances that they're in, we want to be very mindful of the privacy of the family as well. The other component is people tend to see the problems that the organization is trying to solve as someone else's issue. It's someone else's problem. When in reality, a lot of the circumstances could happen to any family, could happen to anybody in your neighborhood and in the community. So really working together to support the people that are faced circumstances of trauma or that are the most vulnerable in our society, that as a community, if we come together to be able to help them, that it helps the society as a whole. So these were some of the thought processes going into to think about how to actually deliver this message and solve some of these problems in terms of marketing and communication. So turn to virtual reality as a new form of storytelling, a new form of communication. And the component, I think, that makes virtual reality so unique is the sense of presence. And to be able to create an immersive stage where you can have the ability to put a viewer into the embodiment of another person, to be able to put them into the perspective of someone else. So this is where I wanted to experiment with this idea and this new technology to be able to put someone into the shoes of a social worker that's out in the community every day, into the shoes of little Mary Ellen, who was 10 years old when she was sent to the court system after being held in a closet in the tenement for hours and brutalized by her guardians. The other component to virtual reality that makes it a unique tool, a communication tool, is that you can create a visceral response. And this also helps to give a sense of presence. So for example, for this particular project, my colleague and I interviewed many of the clients that the organization serves. And part of what we heard was the instability in their lives after dealing with either situations of abuse or situations of trauma, that they felt like they were no longer had a stable footing. And so in the experience, at one point, we dropped the floor out from underneath the viewer in the experience. And so you just physically become unstable as you're listening to the story, right? Mary Ellen actually took a train as the trip from New York to Rochester. So we're able to actually put the viewer in the train as if they were traveling with her through that, and you actually feel the movement of the train going through. The idea of being vulnerable and being attacked by what one person said was the attack of hellhounds. The screen, I'm realizing, is very dark, so all you're seeing are the eyes. That's a little more detail in the experience. But these are some of the techniques that as filmmakers we're starting to be able to, we're starting to develop and see how that can be an effective way to tell a story. We're really kind of at this silent film stage of filmmaking when it comes to virtual reality. The other aspect is, as I said, we weren't able to photograph some of the people that the organization serves, so we used illustration as a metaphor. So these are some of my colleagues that I'm collaborating with. Frank Deese is a screenwriter from Hollywood that's now teaching in our School of Film and Animation. Isabel Anderson was a new media student who I brought into the project. She did all of the illustration on the project. And then I wanted to point out Justice, who was a client that SPCC served, who we interviewed during this process. She was able to articulate in such a creative and kind of metaphorical way about her abuse growing up that we brought her in as a creative consultant. So a lot of the metaphor that we're using in the piece really came from her descriptions. So I want to share with you the trailer for the experience. The QR code that you have right here will take you to the Oculus link. So if anyone does have an Oculus at home and wants to view it, you can access it there.
She cringed, as if she expected a blow, as if she expected I was going to strike her. And I asked her where she was whipped and how many times, and she stated that she was whipped every morning with a rawhide. On different parts of the body, she showed the marks where she had been struck.
And I hear the story of little Mary Ellen told again. This stirred the soul of a city and roused the consciousness of a world it had forgotten. And so I looked. I knew I was where the first chapter of children's rights was written, under warrant of that maid for the dog.
I do hereby order that the said child, Mary Ellen, be released, discharged, and taken from the custody and control of the said Mary Connolly. Dear Sir, Mrs. Wheeler, the excellent lady who was instrumental in aiding me in rescuing little Mary Ellen from the hands of a brutal woman, has called to see me in relation to procuring her a home with her sister, who resides near Rochester in this state.
For the first time in her life, she's unrestrained by bolts and locks, and she enjoys being out of doors as an escaped soul would paradise. She is a helpful, kind-hearted little creature and is making friends for herself.
So the second project that I wanted to share with you is an augmented reality project. This is at the beginning stages, and it's to tell the story of a lost African-American community here in Rochester, New York. It's located in the 3rd Ward, and these are 2 comparison maps that show you at the right is the contemporary map. I don't know if my cursor will show up here or not, but you've got right here, that street going up, so you can see a lot of the vacant lots there. And then probably called Caledonia Street, which is up there. You can see the population of architecture that is along that street. So it's a community that was lost and is now really mainly vacant lots are left behind. And so want to use augmented reality to create digital representations of the architecture from the past, from that former neighborhood that consisted of Black-owned businesses such as a hotel, international jazz club, barber shops, restaurants, funeral parlor, every type of business to sustain a very multicultural neighborhood in that time period. The community itself has such a distinctive, the neighbors reflect back on it, and as in that slide before, spoke to it as being raised in that neighborhood was like being raised in Camelot. Just very fond memories, to the point where in 1996, a group of former residents came together and established a reunion. And it's become an annual event here in Rochester. Called the Clarissa Street Reunion. It has upwards to 10,000 people come to this event, people that have moved out of the region, who were former neighbors in that community have come in for that event. So it demonstrates how distinctive the neighborhood was. But this is what we're seeing now today, is prior to, the neighborhood where it stood originally. You see on the left, this is Latimer's funeral parlor from 1922. Now you see it as the freeway cut through this neighborhood. So there was several, I'm trying to think of how to describe this in a very brief time period here. It's a very complex circumstances to what created the demise of this neighborhood. One of them being the repositioning of streets and the 490 freeway cutting through this neighborhood, as you see here. So the goal is to create almost like a digital living museum of the architecture that would then have interactive components to it to be able to curate different exhibitions within those spaces, experiences, educational models, information that could be swapped out over time to engage in different types of experiences, so that you would take your smart device, be at the location, and be able to see a comparison of what the community was at one point and what it is now. So at the time, at this stage, we're talking about the 50s, the 60s. We had a lot of institutional racial policies, such as redlining. This was another component that contributed to the problems that we see in the neighborhood. This type of racial injustice led to the 1964 racial uprisings here in Rochester and across the country as well too. We had a fatal accident during that time period of a media helicopter crashing into one of the buildings. So a lot of the buildings became condemned by the city. The city took over and then flattened a lot of those buildings with the promise of urban renewal, which hasn't happened. And so we still are left with a lot of vacant lots in that particular case. So for me, I proposed to the Clarissa Street reunion in probably 2017, this idea of using augmented reality to tell the story. Because you drive down the street, you would never know that this was just this vibrant, thriving commercial corridor of active businesses. And that they had an international jazz club there that brought in such talent as Count Basie, Sarah Vaughan, George Benson, just a really amazing venue. So important when working with community projects to reach out to the community and work with the community. These are some of the community partners that I'm working with to develop this project. And we are in the beginning stages, as I mentioned. So now we're working on developing a prototype for this project as a proof of concept, as well as for fundraising efforts. The grand vision is to model the entire community. We're first starting with the Pithod Club. We decided to start there because we have the most content in the archives to draw upon at this stage, and we have very little funding at this stage to be able to produce this. So we're starting with, this is an example of actually an RIT alum who was at, RIT was actually just right around the corner from the Pithod and the Clarissa Street in the original campus. And he was a student there and visited the Pithod and photographed, and this is in the U of R archives. So pulled in some of my colleagues from RIT to work on this project. Beginning stages, Tamar Carroll, who's the chair of the Department of History, and Kelly John, who is an architect in town and a lecturer at RIT. They worked with me to comb through the archives to find images of the Pithod so that we could model the building. We then use some of these documents to be able to develop the floor plan. We then interviewed Paul Connolly, who was a former bartender at the Pithod back in the day, to review the work that we had done. We wanted to make sure that the work that we're doing is as historically accurate as possible. A colleague, Gary Jacobs, who's in our 3D digital design, has volunteered his talent to model the Pithod, which you can see here is the first version of that. And then received some funding to hire a couple of our grad students in the computer science department, and they're working with me to create this initial prototype app. So this is where the Pithod, oh, my time is up. I had to time myself because I knew I'd talk too long. So this is the Pithod location where it was originally. It's now just a big parking lot. And so the app will enable you to then come to the parking lot using geolocation technology to place that model at the location it formerly was at. Then we'll have engagement, touch point engagement to be able to access music, testimonials, images, videos, to try to bring back the vibrancy of what that venue was back in the day. So I've pulled in scholar advisors. This is a QR code if anyone is interested in learning more of this history. Laura Warren Hill that you see here wrote a book called The Strike the Hammer, The Black Freedom Struggle in Rochester from 1940 to 1970. So that's a great resource as well. Organizations I just wanted to share with you because these are just, I originally wanted to show a variety of experiences, but when 20 minutes, I realized I could only show 2. So these are some organizations that are doing amazing work in the XR field for social impact. UNICEF and World Bank are doing projects around the world. Meta has a division for VR for Good. There's actually a really great experience called Traveling While Black, which Erin was asking about, an experience where you would actually feel you're actually in the space. And there's a scene where they use volumetric capture and you actually feel like you're sitting at a dining room table talking to people right next to you. It's really pretty amazing. So I would check that one out. And then this is a QR code I put all the links in a Google Doc. So if you want links to any of these resources, you're welcome to that. New York Times has been on the cutting edge of this technology. I don't know how many of you get the Sunday paper, but back in, I think it was 2016, we got the Google Cardboard in our paper. It was a very exciting time. And then Al Jazeera has some really extremely talented young staff members who are doing some amazing work in this area. The Nikkei Innovation Lab is creating an immersive newspaper. MIT Open Documentary Lab has an ongoing series that you can sign up for that has some Zoom presentations from artists working in this field. And then the International Documentary Film Festival in Amsterdam. Since 2007, they've had a new media division and show a lot of immersive work now as well. So those are just some resources that are available for you all to check out some of this, some other work that's being done in this space. So thank you very much for your time. And I think maybe if we have a question.
Thank you, or not thank you. Thank you. That was a great talk. Thank you for presenting today.
Thanks.
So I have a question on the Marissa Street project. So presumably the data and the images that they'll have for reconstructing that neighborhood won't be exhaustive. But do you have plans to use machine learning or something where you basically take an image and then tell, a computer to make up the rest of it to kind of create a more immersive experience?
That would be awesome. Yeah, we don't have plans at this moment. Working with the technology that's there. However, really in the planning of this, want to approach it and produce it in such a way that we can continue to shift and change as technology is shifting and changing and we have access to that technology. That's the goal. Excuse me. That is the goal. Because yeah, there are these tools now that are available to us that's pretty amazing. We are also working with some of the elders in the community to get first-person accounts. So, for example, the pictures that we had of the Python, we modeled it as a brick building, and then we showed it to Jim Allen, who's one of our elders in the community, and he spent pretty much every night from 1949 to 1974 when it closed at the Python, and he said, "It's not brick." We're like, okay, back to the drawing board. So it's actually shingles that looked like bricks. So now we're remodeling it at this stage. But yeah, eventually I could see that happening. Because I also would like this project to be not only an augmented reality experience, but then you walk into the middle of the parking lot and to model the interior and be able to be immersed in the interior. The other component that we need to be mindful of is that this neighborhood is set up for revitalization. And so how do we continue to keep this, if there is a building that's now being built at that location, how do we activate it in a different way too? So yes, those are some considerations down the line. Yeah.
Just a comment, I guess, for sponsorship or collaboration. Sun House, are you aware of Sun House?
No.
So look up Sun House.
Okay.
And Sun House is a musician. from that era.
Oh, great. Oh, awesome.
And there's some momentum around the history there. And maybe there's some sponsorship or collaboration there.
Awesome.
Maybe you can put some music into your immersive experience. So
Yeah.
it's sponsorship.
That would be wonderful. Thank you for that recommendation. I appreciate it. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time and allowing us to share the project.
So, hi everyone, I'm Neil. I'm currently a fourth-year PhD student, and I'm also a co-chair of this ARVR session. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Anton Jeran Ratnarajah. Anton is a fourth-year PhD student at University of Maryland, College Park, advised by Professor Dinesh Malhotra. His research area is broadly in audio and speech signal processing. He is also interested in building machine learning models to create high-quality sound experience in interactive applications. Anton's current line of research is learning-based sound synthesis and propagation for AR/VR applications. Let's welcome Anton.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me for the ARVR mini conference. So today I'll be talking about our learning-based sound propagation methods for augmented reality and virtual reality applications. First, I'll briefly introduce what is a sound propagation. Then I'll go through the existing sound propagation methods. And finally, I'll show the benefits of our sound propagation approach. So what is a sound propagation? Sound propagation is the process of transferring the sound waves that are released by the speaker to the environment through the air. The listener listens to the superposition of sound waves that are released by the speaker. In this example, we can see that the listener listens to the sound wave that is traveling through the direct path, that is the direct sound, as well as multiple reflected signals from ceiling, wall, etc. The way we hear the sound depends on the geometry of the room, the position of the speaker, and the position of the listeners. If you see this picture, we can see that each listener listens to different amount of sounds and also different sound waves that are traveling through different reflected paths. If you take the listener in the first row, he mainly listens to the sound from the direct sound path, while the listener in the last row mainly listens to the sound from the reflected path. For example, if the speaker in the first row give a speech like this,
became the first clavier master. He and Dr. John Bull,
the person in the first row may hear it like this.
Became the first clavier master. He and Dr. John Bull,
and the person in the last row may hear it like this.
Became the first clavier master. He and Dr. John Bull.
From this example, we can see that based on the listener's position, the way we hear the sound varies. The way the sound propagates from the speaker to the listener can be mathematically modeled by a transfer function known as a room impulse response. The room impulse response reflects the amount of energy of the sound wave and also the time of arrival of the sound wave. The shortest path is the sound arriving from the direct path. We can see in the room impulse response, like the direct sound arrives first, and then the early reflections, those are the reflections from the ceiling, wall, etc., and then the sound from the late reverberation. Late reverberation is the sound arriving after one or more surface reflection. That is similar to the second order reflection that is shown in this image. Once we have the room impulse response corresponding to the virtual environment for a particular speaker and the listener position, we can render audio corresponding to that virtual environment by convolving a clean or dry audio with the particular room impulse response. First, I'll play the clean audio, and then I will play the rendered audio.
I will endeavor in my statement to avoid such terms as would serve to limit the events to any particular place or give a clue as to the people concerned.
Now I'll play the rendered audio.
I will endeavor in my statement to avoid such terms as would serve to limit the events to any particular place or give a clue as to the people concerned.
So, how can we model or estimate the room impulse response? There are two approaches. One approach is we can directly capture or measure the room impulse response from the real-world environment. However, to capture the room impulse response, we require a sophisticated hardware and human labor. Therefore, we can capture the room impulse response only in a controlled environment. Therefore, it is not feasible to capture room impulse responses for thousands of different speaker and listener positions. On the other hand, if we know the 3D representation of the environment, we can use synthetic room impulse response generators to generate room impulse responses for arbitrary different speaker and listener positions. Therefore, using synthetic room impulse response generators, we can generate thousands of room impulse responses for a given environment. The existing room impulse response generators can be categorized into either physics-based approach or a learning-based approach. Physics-based approach can generate high-quality room impulse responses. However, high-quality room impulse response generators cannot generate room impulse responses in interactive rates. For example, wave-based approach cannot generate high-quality room impulse responses at interactive rates. To overcome this issue, we propose learning-based approach. Learning-based room impulse response generators can be trained on either real-world room impulse responses or high-quality room impulse responses that are generated offline using physics-based approach. And once you train the network is able to generate similar high-quality room impulse responses in different testing environment in a very fast rate. Learning-based approaches can generate about 10,000 room impulse responses within a second. In today's talk, I'll briefly talk about three of the learning-based room impulse response generators: fast RIR, mesh to RIR, and scene to BIR. Why do we need a learning-based room impulse response generator? One obvious reason is that the traditional room impulse response generators cannot generate high-quality room impulse responses at interactive rates, while the learning-based room impulse response generators can generate high-quality room impulse responses at a very fast rate. Also, we cannot control the traditional room impulse response generators using non-conventional parameters, while a learning-based room impulse response generator can be trained to control using non-conventional parameter. I'll show an example of a non-conventional parameter in the next slide. Our fast RIR is a conditional GAN architecture that is capable of generating both specular and diffuse reflections of the sound in a given acoustic environment. Our fast RIR architecture takes shoebox-shaped room dimension with the listener and speaker position, as well as non-conventional parameters like reverberation time to generate the desired room impulse response. Reverberation time is the time taken for the sound pressure to decay by 60 decibel, and it implicitly reflects the different materials that are present in the environment. For the future research, we have open sourced our code, and the following link shows our GitHub repo of our fast RIR architecture. The following table shows the runtime of our fast RIR architecture. We compare the runtime of our fast RIR architecture with a CPU-based implementation of physics-based approach like diffuse acoustic simulator or DAS, image method, and GPU-based physics-based implementation, GPU RIR. From this table, what I want to show is that a fast RIR architecture is capable of generating high-quality room impulse response similar to a diffuse acoustic simulator, while it is more than 400 times faster than diffuse acoustic simulator when we run it on. In this example, I perceptually show the quality of audio rendered using the diffuse acoustic simulator and also the quality of audio rendered using our fast RIR architecture for the given room dimension, listener location, speaker location, and the reverberation time. First, I play a clean speech.
I will endeavor in my statement to avoid such terms as would serve to limit the events to any particular place or give a clue as to the people concerned.
Now I'll play the reverberant speech that is generated using the high-quality room impulse response from the diffuse acoustic simulator for the given acoustic environment.
I will endeavor in my statement to avoid such terms as would serve to limit the events to any particular place or give a clue as to the people concerned.
Now I play the audio rendered using our fast RIR architecture.
I will endeavor in my statement to avoid such terms as would serve to limit the events to any particular place or give a clue as to the people concerned.
From this example, we can see that a fast RIR is capable of generating perceptually similar audio as the diffuse acoustic simulator for a different testing environment while at a very fast rate. The following energy distribution shows the room impulse response generated using the diffuse acoustic simulator and our fast RIR architecture. We can see that the energy distribution of the room impulse response from our fast RIR architecture is similar to the diffuse acoustic simulator. The fast RIR architecture is capable of generating room impulse response for empty shoebox-shaped room. But in real virtual environments, the room geometries will be of any arbitrary shape, and the room will be furnished with different materials. Therefore, we need to have a learning-based room impulse response generator that is capable of generating room impulse response for any arbitrary real-world 3D environment. Any real-world 3D environment can be modeled using a mesh representation. Therefore, we extended our fast RIR architecture to take any 3D model in the form of a 3D mesh and to generate the corresponding room impulse response to render audio for virtual reality applications. Now, I'll show the audio rendered using our mesh to RIR on 3 different indoor environments. In our first environment, a person sings from their bedroom and the listener moves around the house. The sound source, that is the song sung by the person, is represented using the red sphere. Now I'll play the audio rendered using our mesh to IR architecture.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. I hope you know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear.
In our second example, a phone rings in the bedroom and a person plays a piano in the living room. The listener moves from the bedroom to the living room. Here, the sound sources, that is the phone ring and the piano, are represented using the red sphere. Now I'll play the rendered audio. In our last example, a person speaks in the hall and a machine works inside a room. The listener moves around the house. Here the sound sources are the speech signal and the machine sound. These sound sources are represented using a red sphere. Now I'll play the audio rendered using our mesh-to-IR architecture.
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the symbol 0, the principle of position, and the concept of base. Pure systems with base 5 and 6 are said to be very rare, but base 20 occurs in English when we use score, as in 4 score and 7. Eventually, no system could keep pace with the decimal or Arabic number system, which has 10 numerals, the digits.
In the previous example, I have shown the audio rendered for the virtual environment. Now I'll show our approach of rendering audio for the real-world environment. Rendering audio for the real-world scenes are useful, especially for the 3D virtual tour. In most of the virtual tour, we move around a muted video. But if you can have audio rendered to the virtual tour, the buyer can have an immersive experience and can have more information when he wants to buy a house. For example, if a television is played in the living room, the buyer may need to know whether that sound will affect his study room, or else if a washing machine is working in a particular room, whether that sound will be disturbing his sleep in the bedroom. So in this video, I'll briefly show how we can render audio to the real-world environment. Any real-world environment can be captured using some household devices like an iPad, like this. So once we capture the real-world environment, we can get the 3D representation of the real-world environment using different softwares like Bundle Fusion. Since we are using commodity devices to capture the real-world environment, these 3D reconstructed models will have significant holes and noises. We propose a scene-to-BIR architecture that takes real-world environment or the 3D reconstruction of the real-world environment with significant holes and noises and render binaural audio corresponding to that environment. So once we have the real-world environment, we can play any audio sources in the locations that we desire. In this example, I'll be placing a speaker speaking in the study room and water pouring in the kitchen. So once we place the two sound sources, we can create the listener path for the 3D virtual tour. So here I show in the orange color the path of the listener.
The concept of.
Now, in the first example, I show rendering audio without using a sound propagation approach. That is, just embedding two sound sources to the video. After that, I'll show how our scene-to-BIR is capable of rendering high-quality immersive experience using the room impulse response generated using our network. First, I'll play the audio rendered audio, just embedding the audio to the video.
Base. Pure systems with base 5 and 6 are said to be very rare, but base 20 occurs in English when we use score, as in 4 score and 7. Eventually, no system could keep and the concept of base. Pure system.
The following video shows the audio rendered using our scene-to-BIR.
with base 5 and 6 are said to be very rare, but base 20 occurs in English when we use score, as in fourscore and 7. Eventually, no system could keep.
So in today's talk, I was talking about two different approaches of generating or estimating the room impulse response. One is by recording from the real-world environment. Other approach is generating room impulse response using a room impulse response generator if you have the 3D representation. Both approaches have their own limitation because to capture the real-world room impulse response, we require sophisticated hardware and a lot of human labors, and we can only capture in a controlled environment. To simulate synthetic room impulse responses, we require the 3D representation of the environment with complete knowledge of the materials present in the environment. But it is not practical in most of the cases. In most practical cases, we may be having a Meta portal or the Amazon Echo devices in our home. These devices are capable of capturing only the reverberant speech signal. So in our next work, we are working on estimating the room acoustics or the room impulse response from the reverberant speech. Estimating the room impulse response from the reverberant speech has two main advantages. One is, once we estimate the room impulse response from the reverberant speech, we can remove the room acoustics or the reverberation from the speech to get the clean speech, and then we can add the room acoustics or the sound propagation corresponding to the virtual environment to that speech to create an immersive experience to the listener in the virtual environment. Also, estimating room impulse responses from reverberant speech helps us to augment more similar speech data to fine-tune the speech recognition systems. To estimate the room impulse response, we have an encoder-decoder architecture. We pass the reverberant speech to our network to get high-level room impulse response features as an output, and we pass the room impulse response features to our decoder network to estimate the corresponding room impulse response. In my final example, I'll show a reverberant speech and then the estimated room impulse response, and then I show the reconstructed reverberant speech from the estimated room impulse response. So I first play the reverberant speech, and then the clean speech, and also finally I play the reconstructed reverberant speech from our estimated room impulse response. First I'll play for a male voice, and then I'll play for the female voice. So I'll play the input reverberant speech that is given to devices like Amazon Echo or Meta portal.
The silver on the floor was scattered.
Then we can pass this reverberant speech to our network to estimate the room impulse response. Once we estimate the room impulse response, we can convert with any clean speech to create reverberant speech to the similar environment. To make an easy comparison, we'll be using the same clean speech as the reverberant speech. Now I'll play the clean speech.
The silver on the floor was scattered.
Now I'll play the reconstructed reverberant speech.
The silver on the floor was scattered.
I'll play the reverberant speech again.
The silver on the floor was scattered.
Now I'll play the three speeches for a female voice. Now reverberant speech.
My friend appeared to live only for the severities of society, and not even his own household.
Now the clean speech.
My friend appeared to live only for the severities of society, and not even his own household.
Now the reconstructed reverberant speech using the estimated room impulse response from our network.
My friend appeared to live only for the severities of society, and not even his own household.
So thank you for listening to my talk. So in summary, in my talk, I was showing the learning-based sound propagation approaches that are developed in our group, and also the benefits of our learning-based sound propagation approach. Using a learning-based sound propagation approach, we showed that we can generate 10,000 of room impulse response in a second, and we were able to generate high quality room impulse responses similar to physics-based approach. Thank you very much for listening. I think now it's time for the questions.
Thank you very much, Anton. And there are many interesting demos there. So we have 5 minutes of Q&A. Feel free to ask questions. I'll take this chance to ask the first question. So you have many words that you generate impulse response, room impulse responses. So I'm wondering what are the remaining challenges or the future directions you see in this topic?
So the future direction, like I'm seeing, is like estimating the room impulse responses from a real-world noisy speech signal. So if we can estimate the room impulse from the noisy speech, we can generate similar training data for the speech applications, like and we can get rid of the domain mismatch. Because in many speech applications, we just augment speech data for speech data without considering the relevant speech in the testing environment. But if we can pass some of the relevant speech in the testing environment to augment some room impulse responses, then we can get rid of the domain mismatch in the training data and the test data.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
It was a nice talk. Does room impulse response include head-related impulse response also, or is it independent?
So
or how does
our binaural impulse response generator considers the head-related transfer function to generate the binaural effects, but the head-related transfer function is more specific to the person. So we are using a universal head-related transfer function to generate binaural acoustic effects in the scene to BIR.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question about the different sound sources in your framework. So that could be some language speech as well as some other sound. So would these be different in your framework in terms of features?
Because our network mainly generates the room impulse responses. Once we generate room impulse response, we can convert with any clean audio. Either it's a speech signal, either music or anything. So our network is independent of any audio signal. We can pass any sound source and we can render the corresponding audio to the virtual environment.
Great. Any more questions?
So in the portion of your talk where you were taking videos and images to reconstruct a room and then applying the RIR algorithm to figure out what sound is supposed to sound like, instead of taking a video, could you just use like an ultrasonic pulse from whatever headset you happen to be wearing? And then once you retrieve the background reflections of the ultrasonic pulse, which what frequency you're pulsing out, could you figure out what the modulation is to what you're retrieving back and then use that to modify the, sound that we can actually hear? Does that make any sense?
So I'm talking about the slide I'm showing here now?
Yeah, so you take a video of the room and then you put a point source of sound in the room, and then you use the video to reconstruct what the sound should sound like with all the reverb included. But if instead of you taking a video and trying to use a vision system to understand what the reflected sound ought to sound like, could you just take a point source of sound from a headset from wherever you happen to be in the room and then, send out ultrasonic pulse, you retrieve back that ultrasound and whatever modulations that the room has presented to that signal, and then basically apply that same modulation to whatever your point source of audible sound is to, adjust that signal?
Yes, that makes sense. So alternatively, we can use any ultrasonic pulses as an input to our network and for it to estimate the room acoustics of the environment. I was showing one approach like of capturing the data of using our iPad. Like if we have those input data that can be easily captured using any mobile devices or any common devices, then we can use this as an input and generating the corresponding impulse responses to render audio.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, so let's thank Anton again, and Jeremy will introduce our next speaker.
I'm Jeremy Goodsell. I'm a 6th-year Ph.D. student at University of Rochester studying optics. And our next speaker also works in optics, Robert Schultz. He's the Vice President of Advanced Optics at the Vuzix Corporation. He's been with Vuzix for over 15 years, where he heads up the optics program. He specializes in waveguide development and holds 20+ patents related to diffractive waveguides and related systems. He leads the team that supports all the engineering, production, test, and system integration work related to optics done at Vuzix. He received his master's degree from the University of Rochester and has an undergraduate degree in physics. Please welcome Robert Schultz.
Works too. Thank you, everybody. Vuzix, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for everybody for inviting us out. Vuzix, we're located here in West Henrietta, just 15 minutes up the road, so very nice to come over and give a talk here. We've been pioneer in the VR AR space for 25 years, a little over that now. You know, some of the first glasses were being produced in the virtual reality glasses were made back in the mid-90s, actually. We've also were producing some of the first commercially available surface relief gratings. So that's, you know, back before Magic Leap, before HoloLens, back early days, based originally on Nokia technology. And it's the same technology that became the basis of a lot of the other systems after that. We go back, we do a lot of work for, you know, internally for products that we build. We also do a lot of work for customers and people coming in. So we spend a lot of time working from customer specifications, a lot of time building custom products for people. So a lot of what our experience is not just the products that we send into the market, but also all of the products that we built across multiple industries, you know, military and industrial partners, that kind of stuff. We've also been working on expanding our manufacturing capabilities. So one of our foci in Rochester has been, we've actually expanded our building, moved to the next one behind us, and taken over an entire new production space, just focusing on producing waveguides right now, making them on demand for ourselves and for others if it comes to that. One of our design principles in at Vuzix has been to keep things simple as possible. One of the things we see as a concern when we look at, not as a concern, but one of the things that differentiators between us and other companies is a lot of companies that come up, launch new products, are really guilty of a lot of feature creep, putting a lot of products in. So a lot of companies that come in, to use a baseball metaphor, when they step up to bat, they're always swinging at the fence. They're always working under the constraints of how much they're trying to get into the product. And when they do that, they're often, you know, they're often not hitting the home run that they're trying to hit. A lot of the Vuzix philosophy has been hitting line drives. So we've been trying to work backwards instead of working from all these components that we're trying to stuff into the glasses. A lot of times we're working from, we've got the format of the glasses, we're trying to make something that fits on the head, something that's comfortable, and then work backwards from there and say, well, what can we put in to stay within that envelope? You know, whether it's a power envelope, a weight envelope, a size envelope, you know, anything you add to a pair of glasses that are not working for you are working against you. So if you've got extra sensors, you got extra cameras running, if you got anything else, you've got extra board space, extra weight, extra power that's being used. Those are things that are working against your designs for making something that is all day wearable, something that's going to be comfortable for a long period of time. So to that end, you see a lot of our products are very minimalistic in the way that we approach. Our kind of bread and butter is a very conventional optical system, direct view, upper left there. That's the M400. It's a single view OLED display, very clean, very simple, but it's got packed in the right is everything you'd find in a phone, touchpad, microphones, camera, all kinds of these things put into a small space. And then moving over, we've got the same form factor with a waveguide-based system. So that's see-through, augmented reality, basic augmented reality things in it. It's got, 6-DoF tracker and the Bluetooth and the touchpad and all that. It uses the same rail system for, communicating. But again, it's something that is just functional for, light industrial applications, that kind of thing mostly. The Vuzix Blade was actually the original Vuzix Blade. We're on the Vuzix Blade 2 now. Was our first real kind of glasses AR system we built. We've transitioned that into the Vuzix Shield, where we're getting smaller and simpler, and we're taking more and more out. The Vuzix Shield is actually a stereo, waveguides on both sides, 3D imagery. One thing that's interesting about the Shield is that we've actually played with the focus in the system as well, so that the waveguides are producing images. A lot of the applications use cases are for situations where something's right in front of somebody. And so that we found that people are looking to the distance and looking close get weary from, their eyes get tired from, switching back and forth in the constant accommodation changes. The conventional way of doing that is by doing what they call push-pull optics, where you put a conventional lens on the front and a conventional lens on the back. But due to space constraints within the system, we decided to do it all in the waveguide. So it's another part that we've kind of pushed on our capabilities a little bit. So the Vuzix Shield, talk about it a little bit, ultra slim binocular, pair of micro LED displays. Micro LEDs are, some of the newer technology. It's not quite ready for prime time for full color displays yet. These are actually a monochrome green system, the way they work, but it's set up with, the video is really clean, hands-free access. They're IP67 rated. They're safety glass. They function as safety glasses, state-of-the-art eye protection, immersive sound and voice control. They've got speakers on the side, audio that comes down. So there's a lot packaged into that. So when we talked about not putting too much technology in, we're talking about reducing the number of cameras. We've got one camera looking out at the world, not 6 cameras looking back at your eye, looking down your hands, that kind of thing. That just controlling the amount of what's happening in the system at any given time. We've been moving from our direct products into more of OEM relationships. So we're working right now to launch what will be, one of our first kind of really white label products we're looking to ship. The Vuzix Ultralight, as it's shown here. I'm not sure it's going to stay the Ultralight, but this is something we're looking to brand for other customers right now. This is down to 38 grams right now. So this is really taking everything that is not required in an optical system and, a total exercise in minimalism. We've taken out extra cameras, everything. We've taken out the logic. We've taken out everything. It's just Bluetooth coming back to the phone, simple waveguide, and smallest projector we can find. It's got a dime cell battery in it. Thing will last 8 hours on a charge. What makes it interesting is that you can wear it, you can use it. Compared to a HoloLens or something else, one of the guys was, just kind of test fitting, wearing it around for, 2-3 days, just seeing how it feels. And that's not something you can do with most products. I mean, we try to keep everything as light, everything as comfortable as we can for, workers and people that are, packing or that kind of stuff. warehouse workers or, remote, support those kind of situations. But this has really been an exercise in taking it even further so that it's something that starts approaching what a pair of glasses looks like. Total exercise and minimalism, as I said. We're also looking at, different use cases now. So we're getting into more, if you're going to wear glasses to exercise, to run in or bicycling or something like that, you want something that, is going to, it needs to be comfortable. It needs to be, something that's not going to slip off your nose and that kind of thing as you're running or jogging or moving. So this is go-to-market ready, turnkey offering. Okay. This is something that's ready to build as is, but we're also looking at means of customizing it, that kind of thing. We're looking, one of the advantages to Vuzix is that, we can customize and turn things very quickly. Everything we do is in-house in Rochester. So we do, well, let me take a step back on this actually. So this is set up, work Android, work with iOS, work with, whatever environment we needed to work in to be functional for people. I forgot I had this slide with all the different colors. This is, we've got photochromic lenses on lens, tints, different styles that are available. These are starting to get into the spot where they're, if you walk into a sunglass hut or something like that, you don't want to see just, oh, there's our product. You want to see a slew of options and alternatives and, fashion forward designs that can be presented. And that's a lot of what we are pushing for as we move forward from here. Another thing that I don't touch on here too much is we're also working a lot on, prescription integration to make these work with people, with people's prescriptions. We've got new IP that we're, building into our newest products now. The basic way to do this is to put a lens between the eye and the waveguide. And if you do that, you can get, maybe 4 to 6 diopters of correction of ophthalmic correction, just by doing, effectively building somebody's glasses, between you and the waveguide. The problem with that is that if it gets too thick, it gets too bulky, it gets too heavy. So one of the things we've started doing is there's actually a slightly curved lens in front of the waveguide. So distributing power throughout the optical system, getting some power in the front, getting some power in the back. It means that you need to take into consideration the waveguide itself as part of the optical system. So it means that you've got to have power within the waveguide as well. But as a system, you can distribute the power across the entire system, get a full script, people's IPDs, people's cylinder, all that kind of thing within the ophthalmic script, and cover an entire range and still keep a compact design, something that's light, something that's still very much glasses form factor. So that's the directions in which we're pushing with this. Within Vuzix, we're full OEM customization. So we do the waveguides. We produce them all here in Rochester, right up the street. That's the manufacturing facility. We do all our final assembly there as well. We design all our own optics, and we also specialize in display engines. The green is what's in the ultralight and the shield right now. The blue and the red, we're working with partners on, micro LED solutions to, bring that type of technology to the next generation of products as well. As far as our OEM business now, one of the things about Vuzix is that we've done a lot of waveguides through the year. So, different types of grading designs, different types of systems to build. We've got experience with all of them. So, if, the full ultralight solution isn't the kind of thing that somebody's looking for, they can come to us and they can just bring us their specifications. We don't just build glasses that are square in, square out. We really focus on tilting, wrapping them around your face so that they feel like a pair of glasses, so that they're comfortable. Changing fields of view, adding prescriptions to the optics, different types of grading designs, whether they're, mentioned here, crossed, even, odd. It's the different styles of the gradings and how to get the light out. It's just we're experts at making it happen. We make that happen very quickly. you know, if from concept to prototype, at least on a waveguide, we can have a new waveguide built inside of a month, without too much trouble. Then we can be building, you know, to shape and prototypes of a system. As long as the projector engine exists, we can do something in, you know, 3 months kind of a time frame. Bottom line, this is a little bit of a sales pitch. I'm sorry for that. Letting our experience work. We're working right now building programs around what customers need. So it's people look at some of the products and they say, well, gee, we really want to have more microphones. We want to have something in there. And that's, we've got all our electronic support in-house and everything else. So that's stuff that we can customize as well when it comes to it. If we have prioritized one thing over another within a system, we can make changes to make it somebody else, because it's all of our own designs. It's all internally done. And, waveguides themselves, we can also just build waveguides. We found one of the things we've discovered over the last couple of years is that a lot of companies are really struggling to make waveguides in volume. When we started, this is maybe out of class a little bit, we inherited some kind of hands-on operations, and we developed our own systems from soup to nuts, from beginning to end. Every piece of it was ourselves. And then through the years, there have been some more people that have come in and started building commercial waveguides. You've got, companies like EBG or things like that, around the world that are producing waveguides for people, but they're, the volume manufacturing, getting the prices down, really getting it, sometimes you need to break the mold and get out of, the thinking that everybody else is kind of locked into on how to produce waveguides. So they were all using wafer technology processes, that kind of stuff. We utilize those ourselves when it's appropriate, but we also use our homebrewed kind of methodologies to do things ourselves and do, to some extent, we didn't know better when we started. And now that we know better, we kind of take a little combination of everything that everybody does to make that work. I've got a couple interferomic pictures of waveguides that we actually make. We are holding these things. The glass, when it comes out of our process, is actually flatter and more parallel than when it goes in. We really work hard to produce, optically within the waveguide manufacturing process itself. The parallelism is the most important feature within how it performs. Not going too much into the technical details. The holding that parallelism is, in line with, taking the top surface and the bottom surface and aligning them. And it's almost aligning it like focusing a telescope onto a ring of Saturn or something, kind of an accuracy. You need to be down to arc-second accuracy to really make these things function and maintain MTF and optical performance, that kind of stuff. Beyond waveguides, touch briefly on projectors, board layout, software, industrial design. We've got all the capabilities in-house at Vuzix here in Rochester. You've got the displays, the upper right there, it's actually the displays that are in the ultralight and in the Shield products. Those are about the size of a pencil eraser. The bottom right there, that's actually the optic out of M400. It was a system we designed ourselves. At the time, there were a couple of competitive systems that were, largely LCD based. We took an OLED. We wanted to have better color correction in it, so we designed it ourselves. Took the really love diffractives in certain applications, but with an OLED display, you can get a little bit of rainbowing, and it can be a little challenging. So we built a system that had no diffractives in it, still had the power it needed and the color correction in it, and it's a beautiful little display. We've been Forte VFX1, I said in the mid-90s, we were delivering some of the first products. The VFX1 there is the product we were building back then. It had a little Cyberpuck controller for working it. Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, I'm just about done anyway. played that the first time on a boardwalk in Ocean City as a teenager, I remember. I remember giving my $5 to try my first virtual reality experience back when Lawnmower Man, that kind of thing was on television. Products through the years, 25. Experience and innovation, really what helped define Vuzix is we've just done a lot, and we've done all different types of systems, and we've really come back to basics, and really the manufacturing and the minimalism in our designs is what we're producing for ourselves. Anyway, this is our offices here in over in West Henrietta. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Robert. We'll have a few minutes now for questions before we move on to the next round of the lightning talks for the conference. I'll start off with a question. When you say that you mentioned push-pull for adding accommodation to the display, you said you have a different method for doing it.
Yes.
Can you go into that?
Sure. Well, the basic push-pull, you add positive power on the far side and negative power on the near side, and you can change where the image is positioned. That's useful. We're actually looking at a push-pull variation for distributing the power for the person in there. So if I could put negative power and negative power on both sides of the lens, I can use that for the individual. Turns out that if you do that, if you put power on both sides of the glasses, you need to decide where is the virtual image going to be focused at the same time. So with a push-pull optic, you're effectively adding power to move the virtual image on one side of it and then taking that back out on the other side. So you're getting a net zero gain on, or net zero gain on the real world, and moving the virtual image in is what the push-pull optic does. We've taken to adding a power to the output gratings to add, you can convolve a lens effectively into the grating structure itself, so they're not linear gratings anymore. There's a little more to it than just doing that, because if you just do linear gratings, you'll find you'll have some disconnects in the optics as far as it goes. But that said, we've worked through some solutions that it's really a clean, able to get almost any range of power we want in the gratings, and then we use that in combination potentially with the inner and outer lenses to position the virtual image where we want, the real world where we want, correct a person's vision across the entire system. That's what we're working towards. Sorry. Cool.
You mentioned mass manufacturing and driving your unit costs down. I'm interested in that and have a question about it. And let me attack it by way of analogy. There is an optical company that was based in Rochester that licensed a technology from Czechoslovakia many years ago. It was spin cast for soft contact lenses.
Okay.
Previously, contact lenses were lathed. The spin cast method allowed Bausch & Lomb to drive down the unit costs with a product that was sufficiently utilitarian, useful, much like you've described here. But that allowed them to dominate the soft contact lens business for many, many years. Is there something about your manufacturing process that is analogous to that, or are you producing that allows you to do mass production, drive down the unit cost, that is fundamentally different and protected by IP, by intellectual property, patents, or trade secrets?
There's a combination of IP and trade secrets in what we do, and a lot of it is different methodologies, the way that we approach things. We've got, I don't know what the current IP portfolio for Vuzix, 270 patents or something in the sort. So we definitely work at protecting as many different aspects of everything we can. Parts of it we've definitely protected. Parts of it we've just chosen intentionally to keep as trade secrets, at least partially because it's difficult to tell how somebody's manufacturing something without being on the floor, depending on what that is. So
what makes it different like a stamping process that allows you to go boom, boom?
Well, and the fundamental process is a stamping process. So it's a UV curable polymer over glass is usually how these are made, or UV curable polymer over another surface. Another company like Applied Materials or somebody might do a direct etch or something. And the question is really, what materials you're using, what glasses you're using, what shapes, what kind of substrates, what kind of process, and what the speed is, and ultimately what the yield is of your processes. And soup to nuts to the entire manufacturing process. Vuzix has really focused on how to drive those costs down each step in the process. One of the things is if you're using a 300 millimeter wafer that if you divide it up into the slices of the pieces, and it's going to cost you $30 a piece of glass before you start building anything, and you need 2 or 3 pieces per eye, and you need, it adds up very quickly. So getting down to an affordable system is something that we've spent a lot of time working on. How to make that happen. Yeah. Didn't quite answer all of it. I kind of talked around it a little bit, but.
Yes. I'm just interested in hearing your perspective on what industries are adopting this technology now. Which ones are at the forefront of really applying this to their businesses?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on use case. So a lot of our focus is on, we see the HoloLens, the Magic Leap products as things that we don't compete head to head with those things because they've got, I was actually, the HoloLens 1, the HoloLens 2. I don't know. I just found out recently there was a HoloLens 1.5 that they spent $1.5 billion to develop and they never released. To have that kind of money and resources to throw at a problem and the pure engineering to make that happen it's a different world than what we're living in, frankly. That said, working with what we have, building what we can. So our focus has been on making things useful, making things simple. And a lot of that, and I don't actually have the other deck with me, but our main customer bases right now, our bread and butter customers are, warehousing, remote support, so we've got companies like, your Amazons and Walmarts who are, not necessarily on the floor, but can also, it can be on the floor, it can be for, grocery picking or that kind of stuff, but also for, warehouse picking and that kind of thing. There's a great little video done years ago from DHL, where they're, doing warehouse picking and talking about just hands-free information in the eye, remote telepresence kind of things, people going out to, inspect a job site or something and having, any spot where you want to leave the expertise remote. COVID was really good for Vuzix. We've expanded a lot into the medical space, that kind of thing. So a lot of places where doctors are using them actively in surgery, that kind of thing. The M400 was, what's the IP67 rating is you can wipe it down and clean it up. We didn't design it with the medical field in mind, but when COVID happened, people started looking for ways to get, keep their people separate. And that was a very big piece of that. So those products have worked very well in those environments. But, so that's where we see things kind of starting at and launching from. And then, we're trying to meet in the middle with the bigger companies as far as where the technology comes together. But,
So, are you providing any SDKs or tools to sort of create a developer ecosystem that can take advantage of the technology?
Yeah, so the way we usually work is we've got our own software teams in-house. We develop our own software, but we also have a whole slew of partners that we work with. So we have companies that integrate. So a lot of the places where we would use these applications, we don't develop the end user applications necessarily. For instance, there's a company that does knee surgeries and they use trackers to, the cameras and track the position, align the pins before they get drilled into Denis, and that those kind of very specific applications, we wouldn't normally write that application specifically. So it'd be a partner that would work with them that would get it out to the final customer. So we've got integrators and kind of middle companies that do a lot of that. So yes, our engineers focus first and foremost on developing the SDKs and things to get them out, and then get early products into partners' hands who kind of expand the network from there, so to speak. But that said, whichever level you'd be ready to drop in, we'd have somebody that could support you on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
So thanks everyone for the expert for different areas, bring up the insight in like lesson training, art design, audio and optic industry. If any questions, so you can communicate in our lunch. So our ARVR program is supported by National State Foundation at the University of Rochester. So it is a multidisciplinary, and we have different doctor students from different fields. So we have 6 PhD students who will give us 1 minute lightning talk here. So my name is Qinqin Xiao. Actually, I'm a third-year EDD student at Warner Education School, and at the same time, I am a master student at the University of Rochester. Also, I'm a training lead of the NSF program. My research topic is most focused on AR/VR training in education, professional training, and even like K-12 education. My work experience, before I started my doctoral journey, I worked 6 years in Hong Kong and 7 years in United States as a K-12 teacher. So thank you. Next, Ali will come here to introduce. Wait. Excuse me, is Arnie here? Maybe he is not here. I can briefly help her to introduce him. So Arnie is currently a PhD student at the ECE department, work on singular image and video processing. His research focuses on multimodal of audio, vision, and language. He also researched on the conversation AI assistant and AI technologies. He currently focuses on eccentric third-person video processing, audio visual processing, vision language and question answers, sound separation using multi-moderate, and video audio language conversation. So let's welcome Neil.
Hi everyone, I'm Neil. I'm currently a 4th-year PhD student at University of Rochester in ECE department, and my research is mainly on audio signal processing and machine learning. And currently my research is broadly under the immersive audio for AR/VR, and I have been working on several different projects. The first one is personalized spatial audio, where I usually personalize the head-related transfer function. And for audio-visual rendering and analysis, we aim to enhance the interaction between different modalities for immersive audio experience. And the last one is synthetic speech detection, where we focus on the security and trustworthy part for the immersive audio experience. And I have been working in several companies for doing summer research intern. I've been working in Microsoft and Tencent America and ByteDance. And I hope to connect with more of you and talk about my research. Thanks. So the next one will be Pei Xiong.
Hello everyone, my name is Pei and I'm a 4th-year PhD student studying in optics at University of Rochester. And my main research is to design meta surfaces that's to help work in different optical components in augmented reality device. Like I designed the meta surface-based grading, for waveguide combiners. And I also designed the meta surfaces for eye tracking application. I used the softwares like Lumerical and RSoft to design the meta surfaces itself. And I also use Code 5 and Light tools to design the lens part and the full optical system. And I also use the fabrication methods like E-beam lithography, thin film deposition to fabricate the meta surface I designed. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Zhihong Sandy. I'm currently a PhD student at University of Rochester School of Nursing, also our master student at Data Science, as well as our trainee in this ARVR PhD training program. Currently, I also working as a research assistant at the Pediatric Oncology Research Group at Wilma Cancer Center. Our group found that there are one third of patients, older adults with advanced cancer, express regret after their treatment, at 3 months after the initiating of their treatment. So this finding make me wonder whether I can involve some AR/VR element to inform patient treatment decision making. So I want to informed by my previous finding. I try to first step, and my current first step is just to predict and identify and predict what symptom trajectory during cancer treatment, because one of the key contributor of treatment decision regret is symptomatic toxicity. That means if patients experience more symptom, they are more likely to feel regret after treatment. So I'm thinking whether I can create our virtual treatment experience for the patient before the initiating of real treatment. So during the virtual treatment experience, patients can experience what potential symptom trajectory they can experience. So they have a brief idea about what the treatment experience look like. That can help them make informed treatment decision making. So they can decide whether I'm going to continue this treatment or whether I will change another option. So that's my first thought. Another thought is based on my theoretical framework, resilience framework. Resilience treatment, cancer treatment is a stressor. It can cause increased symptom. So, but positive past treatment experience can help you deal with the current treatment better. That means if in my virtual treatment experience, I empower patients the skill or necessary skill ability to reshape a positive treatment experience can help them better deal with their real treatment. So that's the goal, my future research. So currently I just finished the first step, identify and predict the potential symptom trajectory during treatment. My next step is to design our AR or VR-based intervention to help patients make treatment, inform their treatment decision making. I'm currently at the initial stage of designing this intervention. So I'm looking for any suggestion and comment about how I can better design this intervention. Thank you. Next, let's welcome our next student, Ewan Fan.
My name is Ewan, and I did my undergrad in Beijing, and I came here in Rochester Optics and finished my master 2 years ago. 3 years ago, and now I'm a third-year PhD student, also in optics. So my research experiences on my skill set is that I can do optical design. Most of them are done in Code 5, and I can still do some Zmax. So I did 2 projects. One is individual, and the other is a group project. The individual project is that I designed a pocket projector that can is about your phone size, but you can provide a 720p image quality with 5 pieces of pure spherical and all plastic elements. And the group project is what I finished in my advanced lens design courses taught by Julie Bentley, and it was a duplication of Mars rover. It has 4 glass group, and the 2 of them are moving and can provide a 10 times zoom ratio. So the other habit or skill of mine is programming. Most of them are done in Python and MATLAB. I do Python to try to run some machine learning module or doing some automatic control for those software like Code5, Numerical, RSoft. Basically, these are software from Synopsys or ANSYS. And the MATLAB, I was working on some mathematical computation for Zernike polynomials and 2D cube polynomials. I do them for freeform surface fitting. So, and the other, I mentioned machine learning, deep learning approach. That this is my ongoing project that's doing some design or optimization for metaform or metasurface components. So I'm looking for 2024 summer co-op, and because the machine learning project is ongoing, so there's not too much results, but I'm pretty sure there will be something come out before the 2024 summer. So it is really good to have a chance to stand here. Thank you. My name is Yuan.
Okay, let's thank all the lightning talk speakers again. And with that, I will conclude our ARVR mini conference. We would like to express our gratitude to the University of Rochester and National Science Foundation for supporting this ARVR mini conference, providing us with the opportunity to engage in insightful and interdisciplinary discussion in the field of ARVR. We would like also to extend a special thank you to Professor Chetin, the ARVR Ph.D. Training Program Director, and also Kathleen, the ARVR Program Coordinator, for their valuable contributions and efforts in organizing and planning this conference. And we would like also to thank our co-chairs, Qinqin, Zhihong, Jeremy, and me. Once again, we appreciate everyone's attendance, and our next session will be Business Faculty Networking Pitches. We will start at 11. We will have a 10-minute break. Thank you.